Hey, good morning. I just wanted to get on here and wanted to put a testimony video together of some of the things that I've personally witnessed God be able to show the overcoming power and His healing power, and some of the ones that I've loved the most. And just through my dad and my uncle, Brother Ron. Many of you know their testimonies. Some of you do not. I've never been able to put these two together, and so believing in testimonies and believing that they have power to help others, I wanted to be able to put this together, and I just pray this is a blessing to you. And in doing so and putting this together, something that I'd like to relate it to is the building of diamonds. Something I love to study is the formation and the mining of diamonds, because it is the pressure that builds the diamonds itself. The pressure that we go under, God is building us as well. And so when you look at both coal and a diamond, they can lay side by side. One is fragile and it burns when heat rises. The other becomes one of the most hardest minerals on the earth. And the difference is the pressure, the time, and the refining. A diamond undergoes up to 50 to 60,000 pounds of pressure for thousands of years in order to become exactly what it's meant to be. And so in that, we know the scripture tells us in James 1, 2, and 3, it says, "Count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience." And in 1 Peter 1 and 7, it reminds us that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it may be tried by the fire. And so we go through a lot of things. Fire does not mean it destroys our faith. It's actually proving your faith and bringing out the impurities to make us pure as gold. And so you can only see the stars in the dark. And we have been able to experience the miracles of God in some of the darkest seasons of our lives as families, whether it was from my dad or whether it's from my uncle, Brother Ron. And so my dad's testimony, it actually began back in January 2012. After a meeting on a Saturday, he came home, began experiencing symptoms with throwing up, and by March, he had lost 19 pounds. He was going through some different things, seeing some symptoms, and in March, he ended up going into sepsis, had a temperature of 103, and so my mom took him to the hospital, took him to be able to see what was going on. He was in hospital for 5 days with antibiotics because of the infection that had grown through his colon. So they came back for a follow-up, ended up finding out he had a carcinoma, and they had to go into a surgery. It was a 7-hour surgery, and during that surgery, they actually found out that if they would have done a colonoscopy, it would have bursted his colon and he would have died because of how much infection was there. And so he ended up going through 6 months of chemo treatment. It was a stage 4 colon cancer, and he had to go through all that treatment. And I was able to watch him as God would form, and under that pressure, it brought him even closer to Christ, to where he's at today. And so through that, we had many friends, we had many family that was coming together. They helped. My parents actually did not even have insurance at the time, but God provided a way. There was things that the hospital ended up making breaks on. There were friends and family that made just incredible donations to our family to be able to help out, and we're just incredibly grateful for that. Through that trial with my dad, we were able to see not only how God refined him and made him a diamond, made him much more under that pressure. Cancer strikes. Satan, when he strikes us with cancer, this is not something that he intends to be a testimony. When he strikes with cancer, he intends it to be a death blow, because we know that Satan intends to kill, steal, and destroy. And that's exactly what he tried to do with my family. Is he attempted to come in and he attempted to make a death blow to my dad, one that we would even call a glue of our family, somebody that shows love, somebody that goes out of his way to make sure that others have exactly what they need. And he is still standing. He has been cancer free since 2013. We go back for some checkups here and there, but he has been cancer free since 2013 through just the grace and the healing power of God. And we're incredibly thankful for the doctors that were involved in that. because they had some close calls. There were some things that it was incredibly life threatening based on some of the surgeries and based on the stage of colon cancer that he was in, and so we were able to see that and experience that. And so, then I was able to actually see and witness for myself not only that cancer trial, but also be able to see the trial that one that I would consider one of my greatest friends and my uncle, Brother Ron. And so, I've been very close to this trial. This trial itself, what Satan actually meant as a trial to be able to destroy not only his family and our family, but he attempted to try and destroy the church by taking out with a death blow with stage 4 melanoma in his brain and lungs. And so, he's had miracle after miracle, things that we are incredibly thankful for to be able to see. You can go and find his testimony. We've put some testimony videos together for that. But if you don't know, God has used him to be a witness that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Through numerous testimonies, he would fall off a ladder 40 feet and actually go into the hospital, and they would tell him that he would not be able to walk again. And we know what kind of devastating news that would be to somebody. But he had the faith, and as well as my grandfather, he would actually be driving to the hospital when the Lord would tell him he was going to come home with him that night. And what news that would be for a doctor to have to turn around and come and say. But there are miracles that not even doctors can refute. Many can have critics over your miracles, but there are some that there's no way to refute it. You can fight it, you can critique it, you can say what you believe happened, but there are miracles that occur that even that Satan has to testify that he lost. And we have been able to see that numerous times. And so he went through that, and then he was struck by lightning, and God raised him from there. And then he went through the fire. And I remember, and I was at a young age in 2007. I wasn't but 12 years old, but I can even remember the day I came home from school. And when I came home from school or a workout, somewhere around there, but I came home, and my mom set me and my brother down on the couch. And we've always had a strong relationship with Brother Ron. And she set us down, and she said that there was going to be some tough news that we were going to have to hear. That Brother Ron had been burned up in a fire, and doctors are really at their last hope. They do not believe that he's going to make it. And because of the conditions, we actually weren't. My parents didn't take me up to see Brother Ron because of the conditions until he was actually home from the hospital. My dad was going back and forth to see it. And see what was going on with him. And there were some very close calls, and God brought him through. And you can go and see that through the fire of what a powerful testimony that is. And so then in 2019 came the trial of cancer. And that's something I want to just be able to highlight, just what I've been able to experience. Because we know critics, they call, they say things and they do things. I will be a witness, and I will stand here and tell you that I've been here through that. Ron, they have used this trial, and God used this trial to actually save my life. And that is a huge portion of my testimony, and a death blow that Satan came to try to take one of my greatest mentors and greatest friends, is actually exactly how God would call me home and call me right back to my rightful place. And so in 2019, he would preach meetings in October, and he would go on and preach those, and then he'd come home in December. That's when things would come about. And at that time, I wasn't even living in the right place I should have been. I was not saved in December of 2019. And that's when these things began to unfold with what was happening and how Satan was coming in with a death blow. And in March is actually when I stepped into the picture to be able to experience this for myself of what God was actually doing. And so, I was there the night before, and even with a death blow that came to Brother Ron, he had brain surgery the next morning, and I would sit in the waiting room, and instead of worrying about the own fight that he is in, He was actually worried about me. He was worried about my walk with God. And, that's something that's always stood out to me, of how easy we can get caught up in the moment of what we're going through, when somebody beside us needs a bigger help. They need greater help than we do. And that's the greatest miracle of all. And that's the saving power and grace of God. And so he prayed over me, and I gave my heart to the Lord, and there is no going back to that life that I was living in. And so then we would go on, and I would move up here, and I would be able to experience how God would show his healing power and give him grace, because I would actually live in the same house with Brother Ron and Sister Connie during the first year, while I was working on a house and building it and getting it constructed. And through that, what I was able to see is, Satan would come in time and time again. It wasn't just the one blow with cancer, but what he also would come with that was organ failure. And he's came with diabetes. And I've seen highs over 600, and that he would have to go through. And I've seen the lows under 50, and the scares of, what do we do? Do we go to the hospital, or do we not go to the hospital, because the diabetes and the sugar is fluctuating so much. I've been able to see the moments that there's, due to the chemo treatments and the things like that, it's caused Ron to be able to throw up and go through the sickness that he's went through. And it's a very real fight, but we have a very real God. And God has been able to stand with him even through all of this. And, then it goes on, and we even be able to see, I was with Brother Ron down in Louisiana here a few years back, and we were down, and as we flew back home, the day or two after we flew home, I get a call that he's had a major heart attack, and the widowmaker of his heart, as he was at the hospital. And the widowmaker, Satan, came in with another death blow to try and take him out. And he was unable to do that, because we understand, and God has been able to show us that until he's done with us, our fight's not over. And God, and Brother Ron, he went through that, and then then he was struck with they gave him a diagnosis of eye cancer, and some of these time frames may not be exactly in order, but these are things that Brother Ron has went through in the last 6 years, that I've been able to see God work his mighty hand in battle. And he will do that. And what I have learned is, we stand and God fights our battles. We stand on truth, and we stand in the faith that God has provided us. And I've been able to see that and watch it. And as he would go through that, he would go and they would prepare to take one of his eyes out, and they would, just the natural humanity of what comes after this. They're looking to take my eye out. I've got cancer in both eyes. What happens? And then God steps in the room and heals them of that. That's something I've been able to see God be able to do. And even here of late, it's here in March, coming in on March, there's been conversations about, what do we do with the kidneys? The kidneys are under failure, and actually would go into a stage 5 kidney failure. And doctors, he actually went in through this, and he went into the hospital. And when he went into the hospital, they told him, we are going to have to admit you into emergency dialysis. See, an emergency dialysis, we're going to put you in the ER, and you're going to be here in the hospital admitted. And naturally, that is a extremely hard blow, because it cuts down your travel. It limits you to where you can go, because there's constant reporting. Your daily dialysis, whichever path you just choose to take, it ties you down to this machine. But we believed, Brother Ron believed, and we saw that no matter what, he believed that God was going to be there, because he's been there with him through each trial that he's been through. And in the middle of the waiting of the ER, he gets the call. And he gets the call that doctors tell him, we've never made this call before, but you can go home. And he goes home, and they call him back the next day, and he is now a stage 4 kidney failure. And what that is, it went from stage 5 to stage 4, and it's because God is healing his kidneys. And we see that, and we see that there's that God's hand, and we see that he is still the same yesterday, today, and forever. And there is not one thing that Satan can do to stop what God has intended for us. And so through this, what we've been able to experience, and what I've experienced closely, is a man in the arena, just as Ron has referred to many times as a speech he likes to refer to. is in this, God has been the one in the arena. He has taken Ron and allowed him to stand on the grand stage in front of Satan and all the critics to be able to show that God is still in power and still in a miracle working business. And so through this with my dad and with Brother Ron is when pressure came, they didn't fold. When the weight hit, they didn't run. And what they did is they stepped into it by faith in Jesus Christ, because men in the arena understand the one thing is that the fight is what produces the strength. And God has been in the arena with both of them and allowed them to be able to be a witness that not even cancer will stand in the way of God's power. And so in that Men in the Arena, Theodore Roosevelt said, it's not the critic who counts, but it's the man in the arena whose face is marred with dust, sweat, and blood. And so with this walk, God is not looking for the spectators. He's raising men and women to stand and be able to stand for the truth of this hour. And so we often ask, why do we have to go through these things? And it's God's process. God likens us to sheep. And we can go to Psalms 23. And as we go through Psalms 23, what it says is, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though we may walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, and thy cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And so he likens us to sheep. And we recognize that you can see if a sheep without shearing, they become extremely burdened. The wool, it grows heavy and they overheat and they suffer the very thing that was meant to grow. And sometimes God has to shear us and he has to remove things and he cuts things back. And so when that pressure comes, understand it's God proving you, because God does not want to prune a tree that doesn't produce the fruit. When he is pruning you, it means there is something there to be worth producing. And so pressure means you matter. And so when the pressure comes upon us, when the test comes upon us, it's time for you to take it back. One of the sermons that Ron would even go into, Brother Ron would speak down in Louisiana before, and it would be a powerful sermon just before this trial. And some of us, what he goes into is, some of us have surrendered ground, our homes, our discipline, our leadership, and our spiritual authority. And it's time to take that back. You may be standing in a trial and need to take your joy back. We need to take that back. And you don't take it back in anger, and you don't take it back in pride, but you take it back in righteousness and be able to take it back into the fullness of the word. And so we take it back to that. And one of the greatest sermons that I always return to was preached by Brother Ron right before, and it was Armed and Dangerous. It was during that same meeting, and we are not armed with the weapons of this world. Ephesians 6 tells us to put on the whole armor of God in truth, righteousness, faith, salvation, and the word. And when we take that on, when a man is armored in Christ, he is spiritually armed and dangerous through the darkness and through the pressures of life. And so you must take on that armor of Christ. And this past Saturday, you can hear the testimony of Jesus from Brother Andrew to Sunday, and Brother Ron spoke, Jesus came. And what we recognize is when Jesus steps into the room, the pressure stops and we recognize it becomes a purpose. And so, we look at diamonds, and coal and diamonds, they all start the same. They all start in the same place and lay side by side. But one quits under fire and one is built. One is tested by fire and the other is refined by purpose. You can only see stars in the dark. So if you're in the dark, there's no need to curse it. God is using that so you can see the miracles. You can be able to see exactly what he's trying to do. And we need to look up and see what God is doing in our lives, because sometimes the trial you're under is not to destroy you, but it's in order to build you and produce a diamond so you could be a light. And so when you're under this pressure, something that I've taken from these trials, when you're under the pressure, when you feel the darkness and the pressures of life coming in, just recognize this is not meant to destroy, but it's meant to build you for your purpose and build you for something greater than you can even understand at this time. We hope this blessed you today. Hope we will be praying for you. If you need anything, you give us a contact. We want to be able to pray and work with you. Have a great day.